Okay, folks, welcome back to Shadowlands. So my shaman is now level 60, and while I was leveling, I played as all three specs. So enhancement, elemental leveling, did some dungeons as resto. So thought it was a good time to do a state of 4 enhancement. They've made some changes, and I actually like the changes they made. I know in the past, I think it was during the Warlords, Legion pre-patch at the end of Warlords, um, when they introduced Maelstrom to enhancement and changed some of the abilities around. I was like, I'm not so sure about some of this, and sure enough, it was a bit. It wasn't bad. It was just a little bit different. It took some getting used to, and I'm not sure I ever quite got used to it. They took away some of the themed abilities. At one point, they said, well, we want each spec to feel more like its theme or its fantasy. That's why Mage has Frost Barrier and Fire Barrier and Arcane Barrier, and yeah. Enhancement has been a little bit like Survival Hunter. It seems like they didn't quite know what to do with it. Enhancement, of course, the main idea was that you are a melee class that uses weapon imbues and nature damage and different things like that to deal damage. It usually is more of a burst damage kind of spec, which is why I typically like to play it, especially at endgame. With my first shaman, I played most of Mist with him, and in fact, did a lot of the daily quests to get the kite that you could get for raising your reputation with all the various factions. I did a lot of that as enhancement. So I have played a lot of enhancement, and I was actually pleasantly surprised when I was questing through Shadowlands with the changes they made. Basically, what they did was take a lot of the base abilities that shamans already had and just made them work together a little more. So it actually feels more like a enhancement shaman. We lost Rockbiter Weapon. They made Flame Tongue an actual weapon imbue again instead of just being kind of a spell. If we look at the baseline shaman abilities, I don't know that there's really Chain Heal is a baseline ability now. I don't specifically remember if it was or not. I think we had. I was gonna say. I think Healing Surge was the heal that all the DPS classes or the DPS specs had. We have Healing Stream Totem, which is a bit weird. This is an AoE heal, so it's just a bit. I don't know, it's just a bit strange to have. It doesn't really do enough healing to heal you if you were questing. It helps, just doesn't do a lot to help keep you alive, per se. I don't know what they were. It's very strange that a DPS class would have 3 heals. You have a Chain Heal, which is an AoE heal. You have Healing Surge, which is your more expensive direct heal. And this will typically be your self-heal as you're leveling. And then you have Healing Stream Totem, which is your kind of another AoE heal, kind of just to keep. It does what it says it does. It's a healing stream totem, so it just keeps a constant stream of healing going while you do other things. Typically, as a healer, you'd put out Healing Rain, or you would heal the tank, DPS, what have you. So it's a bit strange. I've seen a lot of enhancement shamans that, like, every pull in a dungeon or something, they have to throw this down, and I'm like, I feel like I've got it. Like, I know Resto Shaman, has, in the past has had some mixed reviews, but, I feel like I've got this. I don't need, if you want to heal, switch over to Resto, Q as healer. It's fine. The I think Tremor Totem, I'm not entirely sure. They've changed around the totems so much. As I said, we did get Flame Tongue, Weapon Imbue back, and trying to make sure I don't miss anything here. Yeah, I guess for the baseline abilities, there you go. I think Tremor Totem used to be a talent at one point, if I'm not mistaken. Removes fear, charm, and sleep effects from party and raid members. From what I can tell, this does very little in dungeons or anything like that. I've used it a few times on mobs, what have you, and it just didn't really seem to have much of an effect. So I'm a little disappointed by that. PvP, although I don't typically PvP much with my shaman, PvP, I could probably see this having a bit more benefit. And then for the actual enhancement, we got Wind Fury Totem back, which I don't remember. I'm sure we've had this before. I think it was probably before my time, because I don't ever remember having it, unless I had it and didn't realize what it did, because a lot of the emphasis was on what was it? I think it was Searing Totem, the one that would spit fire at your opponent. And in fact, I had mine, I think the last, towards the end there when we had it, I had mine glyph so it looked like Vol'jin's Totem, so it looked like a Cobra, if I remember correctly. We've had different spells that have let us summon 4 totems, so there was always an air totem. I just don't remember what the air totem was specifically. It's one of those details it's been a while. So summons a Air Fury Totem with 5 health at the feet of the caster for 2 minutes. Party members within 30 yards have a 20% chance when they auto attack to swing an extra time. So it just takes your Wind Fury weapon imbue and applies it to the party. So I will use, I use both of them. I use the Wind Fury Totem and I use the Healing Stream Totem. Typically use them on bosses. Since we don't have like a big cooldown or anything to use, I'll just kind of throw those down so we can kind of get through it quicker. We kept Crash Lightning. What else here? And I think, was that it? I think that was it. They made, I think we always had Lightning Bolt and Lightning. Yeah, Chain Lightning and Lightning Bolt. I think we always had. I just don't think I used them very often. So now the way it kind of works is, so you have your weapon imbues. So Storm Strike and Lava Lash are your big melee abilities, of course, especially Storm Strike. That's still your big kind of damage dealer. You have Flame Shock, which we haven't always had. I think it was one of those things they kind of gave us in an expansion or a patch, and then they took away the next time around, and then, back and forth. So that is your big dot. You have Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning, which work with, let me see if I can remember here. So Crash Lightning, each target hit by Crash Lightning increases the damage of your next Storm Strike, okay. And And then I was trying to remember, because Lightning Bolt, if Chain Lightning hits more than one target, each target hit by Chain Lightning increases the damage of your next Crash Lightning by 20%, which is actually really nice. This is one of the things I like, is you haven't always had a lot of AoE with enhancements. You've usually been able to do enough damage to burst your opponent down, or if you were dealing with mobs, what have you. There were always different cooldowns you could get in as far as talents or what have you. But actually having some reliable AoE is pretty good, and this procs fairly often. So you can kind of reapply this over and over again. So Chain Lightning affects Crash Lightning, which affects Storm Strike. I mean, that's more kind of the enhancement idea. I was going to look to see, because I think increases your chance to trigger Stormbringer and win percent increasing. Oh, okay. Your special attacks have a chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Storm Strike and increase the damage of your next storm. Okay. Because it... And of course I can't remember which one it is now. When it... because I don't think you have... Do you have passives as... Just reincarnate. That's not really a passive so much. When you... It's not that. When you get the proc, I guess I could... Well, I guess one way to figure out is to show you. When you... And now it's not going to do it. Was it... I didn't think it was tied to my weapon. There you go. That's what I was trying to show you. So that is Maelstrom Weapon. There you go. So, yeah, Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, and Healing Surge all benefit, so they become instant cast abilities. There you go. And see, it procs fairly often. Gathering Storm, Crash Lightning, I mean, you have 3 procs just right there that are gaining stacks, so it's not terrible. So yeah, so that's kind of gives you more, plays more into the fantasy of how enhancement is going to have to work. Now, one of my biggest criticisms would probably be how Lightning Shield works, because the damage it does is so low now. It only does 53 nature damage. Melee attacks have a 100% chance to suffer 53 nature damage and have a 50% chance to generate a stack of Maelstrom weapons. So there's that. When you figure, okay, Storm Strike does over 2,000, Lava Lash does over about, well, 300 or almost 400. Flame Shock does 2 initial damage, 1,000 over time. Lightning Bolt does 9, Chain Lightning does 4, Crash Lightning does 2, and then you have Lightning Shield does 53. It's just very low, and the gaining a stack of Maelstrom Weapon is good. Let me look now that I actually know what it is. So Maelstrom Weapon, when you deal damage with a melee weapon, you have a chance to gain Um, Maelstrom weapon stacking up to 10 times. Each stack of Maelstrom weapon reduces the cast time of your next damage or healing spell by 20% and increases the damage or healing of your next spell by 20%. A maximum of 5 stacks of Maelstrom weapon can be consumed at a time. So there you go. So it's helpful for that. Is it worth having this just for that? I would tend to lean towards no. That was kind of a big thing back in the day, was you had Lightning Shield. That helped do damage. It's important to in understanding. You had Lightning Shield, and then you had what was it? The passive at the time was like molten earth or something like that, where it would actually fire. Supposedly, it would pull lava from the earth and fire it at your opponent. So you had two passive abilities that were working together. Now you don't. While Maelstrom is nice, it's not going to keep you alive. I still died quite a bit leveling as enhancement because you just couldn't get quite enough burst damage to, especially if you had maybe pulled more than you intended to, or just whatever the encounter was in whatever zone. There were some where you had to defend someone, so you had mobs coming at you. It just didn't seem to work as well in those situations. Everything else was very nice. It was very nice to have your weapon imbues back. Like I said, the way that the abilities work together now is very nice. I actually really enjoyed playing enhancements more as I did back in the day. I quested almost completely through Val'shir as enhancement. That was like one of the first times really getting into enhancement and really playing it a lot. Gave me a bit of an appreciation for it because I wasn't a big melee fan. The further back you go, the earlier I played, I wasn't big into melee. So enhancement was one of the first classes I really got into as a melee class. So, and the spells and abilities changed. We had one. It was like Unleash Elements or something like that would do damage based on the imbues you had. I think we had 3 or 4 weapon imbues at that time. And that was really nice. It was a really nice opening ability. So Flame Shot kind of takes the place of that. Otherwise, yeah, I think that was pretty much it. I mean, you have plenty of healing. You have CC. You have stuns. I pretty much mentioned everything else. You have Earth Elemental. You don't have, I think in the past we've had Fire Elemental as well. I kind of wish we still did. Because there's sometimes you need a damage minion, not so much a taunt. Well, technically I think they're guardians. I think they're considered different. They're not considered pets per se. I think they're either considered elementals or they're considered like guardians or something like that, because they're not permanent. That's kind of a problem with Earth Elemental, is it will taunt and it will pull, and it can very easily pull more than what you needed. So if you end up getting into a sticky situation, it can be good and it can be bad. There's an upside and a downside with Earth Elemental here. Now I don't have that problem as much with playing as Elemental, because you do have the option of using Earth Elemental or Fire Elemental. Elemental plays the same as it always did for the most part. There's really not much of a difference there. They pretty well left it as it was. That's also why I took Ascendant, just to have a little more burst and a little more survivability, so to speak, because I'm pretty sure this Storm Strike, well, it bypasses armor. Transform into air, and air Ascendant for 15 seconds, immediately dealing nature damage to any enemy within 8 yards, reducing the cooldown and cost of Storm Strike, and transforming your auto attacks and Storm Strike into a wind attack, which bypasses armor, and have a 30-yard range. I thought it affected healing too. I'm either thinking of something else or they've changed this. Not entirely sure, because this used to be your like level 85 ability, like your big ability, back in the day. So that's what my talents look like. I'm fairly confident with what I have. You could maybe tweak a few things here or there. So I took Lashing Flames. Lava Lash now increases the damage of Flame Shock on its target by 100% for 20 seconds. So I'm not sure. I was kind of looking back through things, and I'm not entirely sure if you have to use Lava Lash first or if Flame Shock can be applied first. It's one of those weirdly written things in the game that I'm not sure if the order matters, because I typically use out of habit, partially because I normally play Elemental. I usually use Flame Shock as an opener, because Lava Lash will do, or not Lava Lash, and now I can't remember my abilities. Lava Burst, there we go. Typically does more damage if Flame Shock is applied. So I was kind of looking over that. The other abilities, Forceful Wind. Wind Fury causes each successful Wind Fury attack within 15 seconds to increase the damage of Wind Fury by percentage, stacking up to 5 times. So I'm thinking maybe this might be better. I don't know. I tend to try to buff Lava Lash because it's usually a weaker of the two abilities. It's your offhand ability. Your offhand ability typically doesn't do as much damage as your main hand ability for whatever reason. I suppose it's a balancing issue. And then Elemental Blast, which got introduced in the I want to say it was either for Warlords or for the Legion pre-patch in Warlords. It used to be higher up on the talents here. Harness the raw power of the elements, dealing elemental damage and increasing your critical strike or haste by 3% or mastery by 6% for 10 seconds. So increases your critical strike or haste by 1% or mastery by 1%, depending. I just never was coordinated enough to use this. I've thought about trying to use it again. I really don't need any more abilities. I know there was a pretty sure there was a setup in Warlords where healers took this because of the buff. Restoration Shaman are a bit weird because they're Our mastery hasn't always been our biggest stats. It's been critical strike or I think multi-strike was at the one point was in there somewhere. Yeah, we've had other abilities that have been a little more prioritized over mastery. Um, and I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, there was a build where Restoration Shaman were taking this just for the buff in raids and different things like that. I tried it, I played around with it back then, and it just really wasn't um, my just coordinating. It just really didn't work for my play style, I guess you could say. It's always done decent enough damage. I was kind of surprised they moved it to the first tier. So out of kind of not knowing what to take, I just went with Lashing Flames just to kind of help boost Lava Lash. So I might switch these around at some point. Storm Flurry, Storm Strike has a 25% chance to strike the target in additional time for 40% of the normal damage. This effect cannot. This effect can chain off of itself, which that was a big thing with Enhancement Shaman, was getting those chain Wind Fury weapon procs, especially in PvP. There's a lot you've probably either heard or I'm sure there's some videos on YouTube where if you had Sulfuras, the legendary two-handed mace from Molten Core, Shaman could either practically or completely just one-shot players in PvP, getting the Wind Fury procs. So I had Ice Strike. Strike your target with an Ice Blade, dealing frost damage and snaring them by 50% for 6 seconds. Successful ice strikes reset the cooldown of your Flame Shock and Frost Shock. So I thought that this was a new ability, at least as far as I can remember. So I took it to play around with it, and it was nice being able to reset the cooldown on I basically used it for my Frost Shock. However, at the time I wasn't using Lightning Bolt. So Frost Shock was where Lightning Bolt was. So I would use Flame Shock, Ice Strike, and then Frost Shock, usually. However, Frost Shock does somewhat low damage. I mean, now with the stat squish and everything, it's moderate damage. Usually it's lower damage. Most people use it for the freeze because it does reduce movement speed. It shares a cooldown with Flame Strike. They both only have a 5-second cooldown. 5.5 second cooldown. So at the end of the day, I kind of realized, you know what? Ice Strike, the thing it doesn't tell you is it only affects targets directly in front of you. So it's not like an AoE where it just affects everyone around you. No, it just affects them right in front of you. So the snare really wasn't like overly beneficial. The damage is nice. It does really good damage. The reset effect, the second effect where it resets either, Flame Shock or Frost Shock, it resets both. If they would both be on cooldown. However, Flame Shock is a dot, so it's doing damage over time. So you typically would use Frost Shock next. It just really wasn't the benefit. I couldn't. I just couldn't quite see the benefit over, say, trying to again buff Lava Lash, because I've generally taken Hot Hand before. Melee auto attacks with Flame Tongue weapon active have a 5% chance to reduce the cooldown of Lava Lash by 75% and increase the damage of Lava Lash by 100% for 8 seconds. So this kind of helps it proc, so it gives it something else, because there are times where you're waiting for something to come off cooldown. You don't quite get all the Storm Strikes, the back-to-back procs like you used to, and I don't know if that is so much because of my gear or what have you. That's what my gear looks like right now. It's fairly low. That's kind of the downside with playing Elemental is, or Enhancement is Elemental and Resto both are use Intellect. So typically you either have to go out of your way to find gear for Enhancement. It helps now that gear can be used generally on most any spec. It'll just change from Intellect to Agility. However, usually weapons are what I have a hard time getting a hold of, trinkets, things like that. So it's always a little bit behind. I mean, 18% critical strike is pretty good normally. And that was one thing I noticed questing was I wasn't getting the big kind of back-to-back storm strikes where you can just do a bunch of burst damage and just burn someone down. It took a little more effort than that, and that's where again kind of Lightning Shield would come in. It would help you do a little more damage and things like that. So for the time being, I switched over as I got a little closer to level 60, or I might have actually dinged level 60 by that point. This seems to have provided a benefit. It sounds really low. A 5% chance sounds low. But reducing the cooldown and increasing the damage is pretty good if you can actually get it to proc. So for the time being, I liked Ice Strike. It just was weird to work into your rotation. It worked a little wonky. And then to use it basically just for the snare and the reset, the damage wasn't overwhelming because it only focused in kind of a one smaller area. If I'm not mistaken, casting Storm Strike and Lava Lash to also deal damage to all targets in front of you. Electrify all enemies in front of you. Dealing nature damage, hitting 2 or more additional targets enhances your weapon for 10 seconds, causing Storm Strike and Lava Lash to also deal to all targets, right. So it makes, if you have Crash Lightning down, it makes Storm Strike and Lava Lash do, I think it was just Storm Strike before. I don't remember Lava Lash being part of the effect. But it makes them AoE abilities. So instead of just directly in front of you, you have more of an arc in front of you. So I just couldn't... It seemed like if I was going to change something, that would be what I changed. Poor Lava Lash was just kind of over here by itself, not really doing a lot. I just kind of used it because everything else was on cooldown. And I know from past experience, if you can buff it a little bit, it can be pretty good if you can get those procs and everything. Spirit Wolf, while transformed into Ghost Wolf, you gain 5% increased movement speed and 5% damage reduction every 1 second, stacking up 4 times. So this has kind of always been the default. If you are running through, say, some mobs, and there were some zones where they were close together and a bit a bit relentless. Ghost Wolf was definitely helpful. Being able to, or if you were on a mount and you got dismounted, you can go into Ghost Wolf, try to get hit, at least get somewhere where if you're gonna die, when you res, you can just kind of continue on at the very least. Earth Shield, typically when I've used it in the past on a DPS spec, it hasn't worked great. It's only been recently, I think since Battle for Azeroth, that I can remember that we've had this available to outside of Resto. Protects the target with an Earthen Shield, increasing your healing on them by 20% and healing them for X amount when they take damage. This heal can only occur once every few seconds, maximum 9 charges. Earth Shield can only be placed on one target at a time. Only one Elemental Shield can be active on the Shaman at a time. So 800's not bad. Healing Surge heals for just over 3,000. So again, you kind of have to depend. Is this better than Lightning Shield? Well, with Lightning Shield, now you kind of have to think, do you want the Maelstrom weapon? It does do a little bit of damage. It's not great. This is kind of where, like, you know, do you become a hypocrite and just say, okay, this is still better, or do you do something else? In the past, Lightning Shield hasn't really... when they made all the when they did the stat squish in Battle for Azeroth, they really took a hit because it wasn't healing enough. Now that Resto has it as a baseline ability again, I've used it more in dungeons and things. It works better now that we actually have a level squish and a stat squish again, and all of that. We've kind of reset everything a little bit. It works better. I don't know that it would work enough in for a DPS spec in combat to make it worthwhile. I would rather have Spirit Wolf. This has always been kind of my default. When we had our artifact abilities, when you could go through and fill in your various passives and different things, they had one that worked with this really well. And then I think they kind of built, if I remember correctly, I think they built some of it into the passive as a talent. At some point, it seems like, if I remember correctly. Static Charge reduces cooldown of Capacitor Totem by 5 seconds for each enemy it stuns, up to maximum reduction of 20 seconds. This is not bad, I just don't typically use it that often. And it only lasts for 3 seconds, so against NPC mobs, in PvP 3 seconds is a lot of time. When you're against NPC mobs, it's barely enough time to get off a few heals of Healing Surge. It's about a second and a half. So you could maybe get off 2 if you were lucky. So taking an ability that reduces the cooldown by 20 seconds, that would still be... what would that be? 40 seconds? Which is still quite a bit of time. You can die in 40 seconds. So I think being able to increase movement speed, especially in places like the Maw where you can't use mounts, they don't heed your call. You're going to be running around. Most Most of the time now in game, once you reach the NPC you're supposed to talk to, you lose threat of whatever is chasing you anyway, in most cases. Not always. There are a few exceptions, but generally is what I found. So I just feel like this just has a little more advantage over these. These are a little more, you could say, situational, whereas Spirit Wolf is you're always using your Spirit Wolf, regardless whether you're in combat or not. So being able to enhance that is generally pretty good. Elemental Assault, Storm Strike damage is increased by 15%, and Storm Strike now generates 1 stack of Maelstrom Weapon. So again, you can kind of see where, now you see where everything's kind of working together a little more. So this is generating a charge, Lightning Shield is generating a charge. Individually, they may not seem like a lot. This is guaranteed. So you know you're going to at least get 1 if you can get the proc and stuff. Like I said, it's not procking as much, but it does enough, especially if you can get more, a little better geared. I've noticed I haven't had as much of an issue with it. I did a dungeon just to kind of refresh my memory of everything, and I was just curious. I wanted to see if I could get a better weapon. And I actually did pretty good. I was either on par with the other DPS, who were, I think they were spellcasters, I'm not sure. I think I might still have it on, let me see here. Yeah, so there you go. So I actually finished a little lower, but I mean, they're still pretty close. In some of the individual fights, a little less, but not bad. Still all about 20%. Yeah, 15. I mean, you know, there was a time if you could do 250,000 damage, I mean, you were doing pretty good. So, yeah, not too bad. Let's look at the actual damage per second. So, there I'm actually second. What was it overall? So, yeah, I mean, again, pretty close. Not terrible. Room for improvement. Like I said, my gear's not the best right now. I have some green items and different things. I need a different weapon. I need a different trinket. I've upgraded most everything else as a healer. So, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. I've done far worse on other characters. So, swapping specs around and things. I thought, oh, well, I'm pretty well geared, or I'm over geared for the spec I'm in. Let's go do something else. And then I was like, wow, my stats are all over the place and all of that. So it's not terrible. That's a big thing for enhancement is that particular passive. So being able to at least know you're triggering 1 stack of it is generally pretty good. I've played enhancement where Storm Strike didn't proc at all and you were waiting for it to come off cooldown. 6 seconds, almost 7 seconds is a pretty long cooldown. You need to get some kind of proc off of that. Hailstorm, each stack of Maelstrom Weapon consumed increases the damage of your next Frost Shock by 15% and causes your next Frost Shock to hit 1 additional target per Maelstrom stack consumed. So, interesting. I just don't use Frost Shock that often. This would be better on Elemental because I actually use, what is it here? It doesn't actually show me the talents for. I thought it would. I actually use the ice one. I don't know. It's does it actually? It doesn't. It just shows me baseline, doesn't it? It doesn't show me what I actually took. No. What is it? Ice Fury? I think it's Ice Fury. That increases the damage of Frost Shock, which is pretty good. I just don't use. Why would you use Frost Shock over Flame Shock? I tried to use them together. It kind of worked. Frost Shock is just, it's been more in the game for the speed reduction and not so much for the damage, unless it worked in combination with something else like Ice Fury or something. So I could potentially see this if I was trying to get more use of it. Maybe if I had taken Ice Strike and Hailstorm, I might try that. I might swap some things around and see. This might work better. Maybe that's what I'm missing. Maybe Ice Strike would maybe take the place of Ice Fury a little bit. I used Ice Strike for quite a while though, and I don't know, it just seemed limited. Ice Fury, by comparison, is a spell, so you can use it at range, you can use it on any target. If your target dies, the enhancement that it gives, Frost Shock, can be used on another target. There's a little more versatility there. Fire Nova, erupt a burst of fiery damage from all targets affected from your Flame Shock, dealing fire damage up to 6 targets within 8 yards of your Flame Shock targets. So the only issue I'd have with this is I typically only use Flame Shock on one target for whatever reason. In 5 seconds, you want to try to get one. Typically, if you jump around too much, especially as a melee character, that is how you end up dying. So if it worked with, I don't know, if it worked with something else somehow, Chain Lightning or Crash Lightning or something, I could maybe see more of a benefit. I just typically don't. Usually, whatever targets Flame Shock's on, that's my main target. Everything else is just an additional target. So maybe that's just how I play. Maybe other Enhancement Shaman have gotten more use out of this. It's not a terrible ability. And most Enhancement Shaman I've seen don't typically spam Flame Shock. So, because it does have a 5-second cooldown, you typically want to apply it to get the dots started, and then you move on to use other things. So it's a bit of a weird ability, and that's the thing. It's another ability. I don't really need any more abilities. At least Hailstorm is a passive. So again, kind of not for sure what to take, or since these weren't maybe relevant for me because they both use shocks, and not in necessarily the same way that I do with my playstyle. Elemental Assault was fine. I might think about taking Hailstorm and Frost Strike again, just together in combo, and see if that makes a difference. Nature's Guardian. Now, this is one where it's debatable. I think, was it on? No. I was thinking of Resto. The Resto totem on this one is a reincarnation. So you place a totem down, and then if a party or raid member dies, they can reincarnate themselves. Nature's Guardian, when your health is brought below 35%. You instantly heal for 20% of your maximum health. Cannot occur more than once every 45 seconds. So this, I would say, is pretty much the default here. Feral Lunge was I want to say it was an ability they gave us at one point. I want to say somewhere around Legion. Lunge at your enemy as a ghostly wolf, biting them to deal 98 physical damage. It's good, but why do I need it? I have Ghost Wolf for movement. Sometimes they've put different abilities like this in to kind of help give you like a movement ability, so you weren't, in certain fights you could move around more. I just really don't need it, and the damage is really low. So, I'm not a tank per se. I don't have any kind of taunt imbue or anything, as we have in the past, so I don't need any kind of a charge or anything. Windrush Totem. Summon a totem at the target location for 15 seconds, continuously granting all allies who pass within 10 yards 60% increased movement speed for 5 seconds. This is the same as the feathers for with Priest. I am not coordinated enough to use this. So selfishly, and this is really weird because all three of these kind of do something different. One affects you, one affects your group, and then one just kind of affects your health, just completely has nothing to do with movement speed. So Nature's Guardian, I think, is probably the best. This is the most universal one if you're questing or dungeon, what have you. This is like cheat death for rogues, so pretty good. Quite a bit of the time. If it this can get you to avoid those situations where you and your target end up dying at the same time. Crashing Storm, Crash Lightning also electrifies the ground, leaving an electrical field behind which damages enemies within it for nature damage for 6 seconds. So kind of like the Flame Patch for Flame Strike. Stormkeeper was our artifact ability. Charge yourself with lightning, causing your next 2 lightning bolts or chain lightnings to deal 150% more damage and be instant cast. So this is very nice. It's very close between taking this or Crashing Storm. I'm used to Crashing Storm, and again, kind of having the AoE enhancement hasn't always had good, reliable AoE. So it's, I can appreciate this. So considering that Crash Lightning kind of works in the middle of the overall combo between typically I'll use Chain Lightning first, Crash Lightning, so now you're doing AoE damage, then it makes Storm Strike and Lava Lash kind of AoE abilities as well. So you're kind of getting the biggest bang for your buck here. Sundering sunders a line of the earth in front of you with your main hand weapon, causing Flame Strike damage and incapacitating any enemy hit for 2 seconds. In the past, when I've used this, it was not very good because of the shutters a line of earth in front of you. So it's not so much an AoE kind of as it is kind of an AoE/cleave kind of ability. It's not even an arc. It doesn't even work kind of like Crash Lightning and Storm Strike does. Now, it's been a while. This may work a little differently than I remember. when I've seen it, I've always just automatically excluded it and looked at whatever else, because it just didn't work that well when I played around with it. It's a nice ability. It's more, as I was saying earlier, it's more kind of how the actual mastery for elemental would work. It would supposedly pull lava from the ground and attack your target. It was generally targets in front of you. So potentially any one of these three could be viable. I would say this is pretty much more a matter of preference. Stormkeeper really doesn't have much of a benefit for enhancement, because I already get both Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. With Maelstrom, I already get them instant cast anyway quite often. I use this on or for Elemental as kind of as a little bit of burst damage. When my mind is not working. When Lava Burst is on cooldown, or I'm trying to burn a target down or something. So there's definitely benefits because it does increase damage 150%. However, I use Crash Lightning more. So whether it's an AoE pull or just a single target, I'm still going to use Crash Lightning. It's just part of the rotation. So a passive that already increases the spell I have, I think has more value. So again, I would say, unlike some of these others where it's just kind of a weird selection, I would say this is probably just a matter of preference. You could probably take any three of these and you'd probably be fine. And then lastly, Elemental Spirits reduces cooldown of Feral Spirits by 30 seconds and causes your Feral Spirits to be imbued with Fire, Frost, or Lightning, enhancing your ability. So this was part of our artifact ability again. It was one of the things you could put artifact power into. I've tried this. First of all, your Spirit Wolves work perfectly fine as they are. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They used to heal. I want to say that was the difference between the artifact version and the talent version, was they used to heal you. I can't remember if it was damage they did or damage you did while they were summoned. Having the Fire, Frost, or Lightning seems like a good idea. It's kind of like the Monk ability that lets you summon three versions of yourself that kind of mimic your abilities. It sounds good. It works a little differently in practice. I would rather just have my Spirit Wolves as is. It doesn't... it reduces the cooldown, but it doesn't do anything with their duration or anything else. It says it enhances their abilities. When I used this before, I don't know what it was that it was supposed to be enhancing, but I couldn't really tell the difference. And in some cases, depending on what combination of the three elements you get, they were actually slightly worse. Spirit Wolves, as they are pretty much kind of a short term, kind of your it's 2 minutes, so it's kind of a short term cooldown, burst damage kind of thing. I suppose this takes place of Fire Elemental if you wanted to think about it that way, even though it works differently. They also generate a stack of Maelstrom. Yeah, I had no problem with them as they are, I guess would be what it comes down to. Earthen Spike, summon an Earth Spike under an enemy, dealing physical damage and increasing physical and nature damage. you deal to the target by 20% for 10 seconds. So physical damage is the most potent damage you can deal, aside from bypassing armor, as far as I know, if I'm thinking of the right thing, if I'm not mistaken. So it sounds really good. Again, I played with this a lot. I think I even played with this. I think this is an option for Elemental as well. I just wasn't. First of all, I have enough abilities. As Elemental, I have even more abilities. So adding something else just wasn't. Just didn't seem great. Doing more when I've played with this before, it just didn't do kind of as well in practice as what you would think it would have. It's a bit wonky to work into your rotation. It's one thing if something has a few second cooldown or 5-second cooldown or even a 10-second cooldown, but 20 seconds is a bit weird because it's not exactly a cooldown, but you can't exactly work it into a rotation. So you kind of have to know when to use it. And those are the abilities that just kind of set on my bar and I never use them because I never want them on cooldown in case I need to use them. So it's kind of weird. You kind of go around a vicious circle there. So Ascendant works perfectly fine. I've always usually leaned towards taking Ascendant. If you need burst damage, you have it with this. It's just a nice thing to have if you're trying to deal with a mini boss or something and you're just a little bit, it gives you just a little bit extra DPS to kind of get through it. So, yeah. So there you go. You probably, of what I've seen from previous experience and now, you probably have some of the most options for picking and choosing with enhancement, I would say. Some of these aren't even necessarily bad abilities, they're just kind of in weird slots. Which again is probably a well-reasoned argument for why the old talent tree system was better. I'm going to play around with some of these, I think. That's why I wanted to do kind of the state of now. So while my thoughts were fresh in my head from leveling and everything, this is what I used. Like I said, the only thing I swapped out was Ice Strike. And it seemed to make... Whoa, hello. It seemed to make quite a bit of difference with Lava Lash when I took Hot Hand. Especially when I got towards the end. The closer I got to 60, I don't know if it was a gearing issue or what, because I was equipping gear as I was getting it. The mobs and everything seemed to get harder, and it really slowed the pace of everything down. So I think it was a combination of kind of being frustrated a little bit because I wanted to get, you could see the end in sight, and then all of a sudden your progress got slowed. Or if it was just, I think it was a combination of that and just kind of wanting to play around. You use some abilities, some or one ability enough, you kind of know how it works. Then you try something else, and you're like, okay, let's switch back and kind of, see which one you prefer, which one works better. So, yeah. So there you go, folks. There was my state of for Enhancement Shaman. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.